know about you guys, but I was highly offended by this act of defiance, this blatant display of treachery, the outright betrayal. How could a network that prided itself on being the worldwide leader in woke, how could a network that allowed Crying Ryan Clark the creative freedom to manufacture racism, how could a network that is dedicated to diversity, a network that gave untalented dorks like Clinton Yates, Monica McDougal, Sarah Spain, a woke white woman who had the charisma of a sloppy fart. This is the network that gave these people the opportunity to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, all based on the fact that they represented true diversity. They represented equity. Whatever happened to equity? I was only hired because of diversity. For the better part of a decade, ESPN was the place where the people from high school who were overlooked, the people who spent 4 years of high school getting their heads dunked into the toilet. For the better part of a decade, ESPN gave them the opportunity for the first time in their lives to have their voices heard. Now, all of a sudden, after years of employing diversity deputies, years of employing people who can manufacture racism on command, now ESPN is dumping the woke warriors to hang out with the cool kids? Throughout the week this week, deacons at Woke United Methodist have been mad. They feel betrayed. Their prized herd, ESPN, has officially filed for divorce. It wasn't enough that ESPN fired damn near every diversity deputy at the network. It wasn't enough that ESPN damn near eradicated the woke fungus. It wasn't enough that ESPN filed for divorce. Now, they want to add fuel to the flaming ass fire by having the face of their network hang out with Orange Man Bad. And it wasn't just Pat McAfee hanging out with Don Trump. Executives at ESPN, upper management, or as Jamel Hill preferred to call them, my oppressors, they were also hanging out with Don Trump. My inside sources are telling me that Jimmy Pitaro, the boss of bosses at ESPN, he was allegedly seen shaking the orange hand and laughing at one of his charming jokes. Initially, I was confused by this outrage from deacons at Woke United Methodist. Earlier this week, Pat McAfee and the cool kids were at the Patriot Games, which were broadcast by ESPN. The Patriot Games are a part of the America 250 initiative. The program is designed for high school kids. 120 student athletes from across the country, they compete at the Patriot Games for a chance to win college scholarships. Now, as a dedicated member of the woke faith, as someone who preaches the good word, this sounds like a win-win, right? For starters, I thought the deacons always prioritized the children. Oh, the children! It's all about the children! What's even better about the Patriot Games? The children are competing for scholarships to Woke U, or as normal people prefer to call it, the Indoctrination Center. Don Trump is giving these young people the chance to be indoctrinated for free. They won't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for their indoctrination. They won't have to deal with decades of debt to relearn the definition of a woman. These amazing young athletes, they will learn how to struggle to properly identify a woman for free. It's a win-win. So, why are deacons at Woke United Methodist? Why are they so upset about the Patriot Games? Their outrage has nothing to do with the Patriot Games and more to do with the symbolism, what it represents. Pat McAfee hanging out with the Trumper, ESPN embracing Don Trump on their network. Hell, at one point, I think it was Laura Rutledge. She interviewed Don Trump for ESPN. 5 or 6 years ago, that was unfathomable. This is the same network that claimed Leah Thomas was Woman of the Year. Why has ESPN betrayed their woke brothers who want to be their woke sisters to embrace Don Trump? Pat McAfee deserves some of the credit. When he signed with ESPN a few years ago, I had serious doubts that Pat McAfee would survive long-term at the network. If you look at his media career, Pat McAfee never stays at one place for very long. Plus, he didn't fit the culture at ESPN. Pat McAfee is a normal dude. He's about beer and boobs. The masculinity working at ESPN at the time, they were about tears and wiener. I just didn't see how it was possible for this marriage to last long term. I thought Pat McAfee would conform. I thought he would be baptized and born again in the woke faith, or he would realize the culture at ESPN was toxic and get the hell out of there. But miraculously, something else happened, something unexpected. Instead of ESPN changing Pat McAfee changed ESPN. So he does deserve some of the credit. But there's another reason that ESPN denounced their woke faith, and I think this is the real reason ESPN stopped celebrating Wiener. Money. Uncle KC, what do you mean? ESPN generates billions of dollars in revenue. They're consistently ranked in the top 3 on cable. ESPN is doing amazing. It's ironic that you mentioned cable because the decline of cable is the reason for this drastic shift at ESPN. For decades, ESPN was the most expensive network on cable. Your average cable network, USA, BET, LGBTV, they would charge cable satellite providers $2 or $3 per month per subscriber. ESPN was charging $8, $9, $10 a month. Anytime there was a carriage dispute between ESPN and a single cable provider, especially if the dispute happened during football season, which it always seemed to, ESPN had all the leverage. If you had Comcast and they were refusing to pay ESPN so the network was blacked out, Comcast would lose thousands of subscribers. They would just subscribe to Dish Network, DirecTV. For decades, ESPN was financially supported by millions of people who did not watch their network. What cable and satellite providers would do to offset the exorbitant cost of ESPN, they would include ESPN in packages with channels that women wanted to watch. Lifetime, Bravo, HGTV, E! If your wife wanted to keep up with the Kardashians, she also had to pay for ESPN. This guaranteed money, it gave ESPN the flexibility to take risks, like embracing diversity, embracing the woke wiener, hiring people like Bomani Jones and allowing him to fail miserably for years, turning around the horn into a polished turd, hiring people like Sarah Spain, who has the talent of a legless man running a marathon. ESPN had the benefit of being dedicated to diversity because they had guaranteed money. But once cable and satellite declined, once the guaranteed money train turned into the bruised caboose, ESPN had to start giving their audience what they wanted. Because now, ESPN needs people to pay for their streaming service. The days of bundling ESPN with Bravo, those days are over. For the first time in their history, ESPN is operating as a standalone network, which means they have to appeal to the majority instead of appealing to the microscopic woke minority. ESPN has to appeal to men instead of men pretending to be women. And to be honest with you, I question whether ESPN was ever truly woke. People seem to forget this, but 2017, 2018, woke was trendy. Well, the mainstream media was creating the illusion that woke was trendy. Corporations, they have a tendency to embrace trends. It's rare for corporations to have values, at least when it comes to politics. When corporations bought into the illusion that America was woke, they embraced it. Nike, Bud Light, Target, ESPN, North Face, Cracker Barrel, Maybelline. Remember when Maybelline made Bob Dylan Mulvaney the face of their brand? Maybe it's Mulvaney. By the way, anyone seen Bobby D lately? For 12 to 18 months, Dylan Mulvaney was a mainstream star. Hey boys, it's me, Bobby D. Follow me as I make the arduous journey through 365 days of girlhood. Four years later, most people could not identify Dylan Mulvaney in a one photo lineup. Hell, you could put Dylan Mulvaney next to a random unknown in the WNBA, and more people would be able to identify the anonymous WNBA player. The truth is, ESPN ditched being woke because woke was no longer convenient. It was no longer best for business. And to be honest with you, I think ESPN realized that most normal people are tired of politics. Uncle Casey, that's not true. They just embraced Donald Trump. They broadcast an event he created. ESPN has betrayed us. They're now on the other side. They betrayed the dorks to be accepted by the cool kids. The Patriot Games, it's not a political event. ESPN having Pat McAfee, the face of their network, ESPN having Pat McAfee welcome Don Trump and sit with him at the event he created, that was not political. It was an honor. If Barack Obama was president, it would be an honor. Sitting with the president, welcoming the president to your network, no matter who the president is, it's not political, it's an honor. That's how it's always been in America until recently. And I think most people are tired of it. I think most people are tired of being bombarded daily by politics. Hell, it's the reason I quit talking about it so much here on the channel. Politics used to be a nuisance that we dealt with every 4 years. During COVID, the country was bored, and the country became obsessed with it. The country was divided because of some doofus manufactured culture war. I think ESPN finally realized that most people have moved on. Now, obviously, the WNBA hasn't moved on, and that is a huge risk for the WNBA. We'll be talking about that later this afternoon because after what happened yesterday, the WNBA is finished. We'll get to that later this afternoon. I'll see you guys then.